So I finally watched Kraven the Hunter last week, the newest and very likely final film in Sony's attempt at a cinematic universe built around live-action Spider-Man villains without actually using Spider-Man. Although they always kind of promised and teased they'd use Spider-Man, I feel like every single one of the Sony live-action films, they'd like try and trick everyone into thinking Spider-Man was actually going to be in this one. I remember that was a big thing with Morbius, where we had that trailer with the Raimi Spider-Man poster on the side, which was actually a screenshot from the Spider-Man game, I think, from what I remember. And then that never happened, and then that scene ended up not being in the film at all. And that kind of feels like the sort of thing for Sony that I hope, if you're watching this video, I hope that you understand that I'm very negative on these films. I didn't really love any of them. So if these are films that you really like, then maybe you don't want to watch this. And I wish I did. I wish I could say that the Sony Marvel movies are great. But to me, I think that they are the most disappointing and the worst superhero films getting made currently. It's not even like the Fox X-Men stuff where, sometimes Fox X-Men would have a really, really, really bad film, but a lot of the time they'd at best be some of the greatest superhero films of all time. At worst, they'd be bland to average. I feel like the Sony Marvel films pretty regularly put out some bad, bad, bad stuff. And I feel like Sony has always tried to trick people into seeing them with doing things in the trailer, like with Morbius, where they'd show that Spider-Man tease or whatever and make you think that it's going to be a big part of the film, or having Vulture in the trailer as well, making you think he's going to be a big part of the film, only to him being in a really weird post-credit scene. I don't know. I just feel like it was a lot of promises constantly being made because they wanted people to watch these films, knowing they were never going to fulfill those promises or build on them. Like, they kind of feel like the mid stuff we'd constantly be getting in the late 1990s or the early 2000s, where I know a lot of people like the Daredevil film, 2003 Daredevil, or the Elektra film, or I don't know, the Captain America 90s film, or stuff like that, where I know they have their fans, but they were always kind of the bottom of the barrel superhero stuff getting made. And it feels like the Sony Marvel films have, in my opinion, taken the crown, where they're currently the most underwhelming films, where they feel like they're either cash grabs or Sony's attempt to keep the IP for these characters, which is weird because the films never necessarily did well box office wise. And I know that the Venom films are the ones that people sort of talk about and are sort of okay with, even though the reviews for them are always very negative. The general audience seems to be okay with the Venom films. They're always the one people most enjoy out of the six films. They're also the ones that make more money than the other ones because it seems that there is a bit of an audience there for Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock. He's the one that people want to see be brought into the MCU if they ever do that. But yeah, I'll just say straight off, I dislike all six films. Some of them are definitely better than others, and some are more watchable than others, but I don't exactly have very good things to say about any of these films. But since Kraven is the last one, I thought it'd be fun to at least rank them all, since we're probably not going to get any more chances to talk about this really, really weird cinematic universe. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe because it really helps out the channel, and I'll try never to talk about these films again. But anyway, let's talk about Sony's sad attempt at an MCU. So in sixth and final place, I have Morbius, and I feel like this one is probably expected at this place because Morbius is sort of an infamous film online. Is just sort of an atrocious film that never should have happened. It's the most boring film on this list easily. I don't remember much from it other than just wanting it to end, and the film sort of got a reputation online due to the constant "it's Morbin time" or people posting that Matt Smith scene. It was so talked about online as a joke, where Sony actually re-released the film because they thought people were actually going to ironically go see it, which they didn't. And despite everyone making jokes about the film, the actual film is lifeless, devoid of anything that you'd want to even laugh at in an ironic way. The jokes online made everyone, I think, fool themselves into thinking that this film is actually kind of watchable and it'll be a good bad time or just a good film to laugh at, but it isn't. There is nothing worth making fun of this film because it's just bland, and the entire time you're checking your phone or you're checking your watch and praying it's almost over. I think Morbius is pretty easily the worst DC or Marvel film of all time, to be honest. I can't think of a film I've seen from either franchise that I would say I think is more boring or is worse than Morbius is. I don't know, it's just nothing, and I have zero want to ever revisit this film. Also, what was that Vulture post-credit scene?
I'm not sure how I got here. Has to do with Spider-Man, I think. I'm still figuring this place out, but I think a bunch of guys like us should team up.
What was the point of that? What were they intending with that? Was it genuinely just to trick people into thinking Morbius was going to be more of an important film than it was? What was it for? Okay, in fifth place, I have Madam Web. And in complete contrast to Morbius, I do think this film is pretty watchable and is just an interesting film from a filmmaking perspective, because it's what Morbius should have been, in that this film is legitimately a funny bad film, I think. Like, so many things happen in this film that made me laugh because of how weird of a decision it was. And I know it's kind of mean because they 100% didn't make it with that intention. Like, it's not like they purposefully made the ADR on the villain bad on purpose or made the editing bad on purpose, but it is bad. And it's bad in an extremely funny way that it's like a film I've never seen before, that it just made this film stick out and be immediately more memorable and have more of an impact on me than Morbius did. And to be honest, I'd almost say this film is the most memorable of all six, because a year later since I saw it, I'm still sort of fascinated because of their choices. Like, I just briefly mentioned the ADR there, and I've never seen a film with ADR so blatantly bad.
No idea of the torment and torture of dying over and over again. Girls cannot exist. They will try to destroy me, as I will you if you don't find them. She can't hide them forever.
Like, every single time the villain character speaks, whatever the audio is does not match up with his lips in any way. And I've never seen a film so obviously have it that way. It feels like, I don't know, in the edit, maybe they've realized the film was not salvageable, so they didn't care enough to do better ADR, or they didn't care enough to kind of change anything. And this is probably the most disappointed film of these, if I'm honest, because I remember having some actual hope that this film was going to be at least solid, just based off of the cast, the characters they were using, the set pictures. It all felt like this was the one that could have ended up being pretty good and having something really cool going on underneath. But the characters they have, they use dreadfully. The all the costumes are used for like 2 minutes at the very end of the film, and I think that they were maybe using that again as a way to trick audiences into thinking this film was going to be bigger scale than it was, but it wasn't. It's just another bad film. In fourth place, I have the second film from the Venom trilogy, Venom Let There Be Carnage. Look, I'll give this film some credit where it's deserved. This is the one film in the 6-film Sony universe that actually sort of understood that these films have the ability to be funny and goofy and don't have to be completely serious. And it's probably for the best that this film kind of does that, where they try and have fun with it, they try and get goofy, and that is what Let There Be Carnage does for the most part. It takes any goofy elements from the first film and dials them up to 1,000, so that what you're left with is a film that's trying really, really, really hard to be funny rather than serious. And it takes the more goofy, weird elements of Venom. It lets Tom Hardy be wacky. Like, I do feel like the films probably would have been better if they all took more of this approach. But while the goofy Venom stuff works, I don't really think a lot of the surrounding elements of that sort of stuff work as well. Like, there's a whole side plot with the police or with Eddie's ex-wife, and it kind of brings down the overall film. If the entire thing was just the Venom Carnage stuff, it would have been a much better film, because the police stuff, Eddie's ex-wife, it usually falls sort of flat and isn't really funny. Overall, it just kind of makes the film kind of bleh or mid kind of throughout. In complete contrast to Venom Let There Be Carnage is the first film, and to its disservice, it just tries to be serious for the most part. It takes itself very, very, very seriously in a way that it definitely shouldn't. It takes all of its characters and its situations and even its dialogue very serious. It wants you to go into this film believing everything. And outside of a few weird scenes, like when Tom Hardy jumps into a fish tank to, eat like a lobster or something like that. I don't know. I rewatched Venom before the third film, and for some reason it's already kind of out of my head where I can't really remember much. But it just feels like a lot of this film is kind of boring as well. Riz Ahmed is a really great actor, and he's wasted here as a villain. Very forgettable. Venom 1 is just, in general, boring. But I do think the bits of it that make it serious work a little better than the bits in Let There Be Carnage that tries to be too goofy. So, I don't know. They need to find a good middle ground with this, and thankfully I think they found a good middle ground in the third and final film. So in second place is the most recent Marvel Sony film, and likely the last one, and that is Kraven the Hunter. And maybe it's because this was the one film from this franchise I got to watch from the comfort of my own home, so it gave me a little more time to make tea, pause the film, check my phone sometimes, that sort of thing. But I was actually going into this film bracing myself for the kind of films we'd come to expect from Sony, and I was pretty okay with the film as a whole. I thought the fights were cool. I thought the opening, 8 or 9 minutes of the film are probably the best opening out of any of these films, to the point where Sony actually released those first 8 or 9 minutes online before the film came out, which I think is because they recognized that was the best part of the film and they wanted to kind of show off something good about it. But I thought the characters were enjoyable. It just, in general, it felt like a competently made film. Like, the people making it were actually pretty invested and pretty into what they were doing, which was not at all how I felt about, Madam Web or Morbius, which, from a filmmaking standpoint, Kraven was a legitimate film, whereas Madam Web was just a mess, and then Morbius was so devoid of life and boring, and I never felt like that with Kraven. Now, I didn't think it was great or anything, but it was legitimately fine, like a very middle of the road film. Maybe I should have watched all these films from my room, and my opinion on them would be the same. And in first place is the final film from the Venom trilogy, The Last Dance. And this is what I think to be the best film from the Marvel Sony timeline or whatever. Didn't have an amazing time with it, but there were enough enjoyable elements in this film that kind of kept my attention the whole time. I thought the third act in this film was probably the best third act in all of these films. I felt like it had a really good mix of like the seriousness of Venom 1 and the more goofy elements of Venom 2, where 1 might be too serious, 2 might be too goofy, but 3 is a pretty solid middle ground of all of the elements, where it has your goofy Venom elements while also having legitimate stakes and a serious tone where it needs to, which is usually my favorite superhero stuff, is when they do a really good job at having fun and joking around, but not at the extent of when the film needs to be serious or needs to really have stakes or have like a compelling villain that you're scared of. And I thought the supporting cast of this film was also better than we're used to seeing in this stuff. Maybe it's because I only saw it last October, but I feel like the film had more of an impact on me and was more memorable than I'm used to feeling about the Venom trilogy. Anyway, that's kind of how I felt about all of them. Morbius and Madam Web would be like a 1 or 2 stars out of 5. Venom 2 is like a 2.5 out of 5. Venom 1 and Kraven would be about a 3, with probably Venom 1 being like a low 3, and then Venom 3 is a 3.5 out of 5. So, you know, a kind of a mix of ratings there. But how do other people feel about the films from the Sony Marvel franchise? Do you agree with me where you think that these are kind of the worst of the worst when it comes to what superhero films have been lately? Or is it just kind of like they better than we even used to be getting? Or are these your favorite films of all time? Which I'm pretty interested. I remember when Madam Web came out, and I was super, super, super negative on it. And remember going on to like Darren's podcast over in the pipeline where we were talking about the film, and I was surprised that there were some people there who actually were pretty into the film and enjoyed what it was going for. So I know I'm kind of not the like my opinions on this aren't what most people think or whatever. I know a lot of people actually do quite enjoy these films, including the Venom ones. So I'll be interested to hear from people if they did watch this video and they like those films. Let me know. And as always, if you're not subscribed, make sure to do so. If you are, a like and a share as always, huge help. And thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.